So I'm sat here with Bryce Lightbody, who's the captain for the Australian team this year, the 10th year of Battle of the Nations. So one of the reasons we got you and Bryce is that this is your 6th Battle of the Nations. You've competed in multiple categories, both duels, pro fight, and obviously the 5v5 and 21s as mercenary last year in HMB Green, was it you were in last year?
Yeah, HMB Green was our team.
So the first question I want to ask you is, having been coming now for 6 years, what are some of the biggest differences you've noticed from when you first came to now?
The most notable difference would definitely be the caliber of the fighters. You know, when we first started attending, there was a couple of teams that were really, standout teams, and now the entire pool of fighters just picked up their game significantly. And now you look at any country that's been for 1 or 2, and really they're, competing for good spots, like they're fighting well.
Yeah, so for you guys coming from Australia, are there any teams that you really look forward to fighting?
Definitely the big teams. So Russia and Ukraine is always fantastic to fight just because they're so skilled, experienced fighters.
Yeah.
Learn from the best.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we also have all of our really close teams that we started with. You're looking at Austria and Mexico and Argentina. It's always really good to see the teams that we kind of began fighting with and see how we compare to those teams at the same era as us.
Yeah. So this year, obviously, you are part of the men's 5v5. What other categories are you taking part in this year?
So we're doing nearly every category. So we're also doing 12 vs 12. We're forming a joint team with China and New Zealand in the 30 vs 30, which I'll be captaining that, but under the Chinese banner. And then also an alliance for the 150 vs 150.
Of those, which one are you looking forward to the most?
So the 12 vs 12 category is really interesting dynamic. We did some 10 vs 10 in Australia, really interesting. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. But the 150 vs 150 is going to be very exciting, and really interested to see what sort of tactics and communication and movements we can achieve.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting one as a spectator to view, because it's unlike anything that we've seen before. And 21 versus 21, it was always, for me as a fighter, one of my favourites, but also now as a commentator, one of my favourites, because you see real sort of like small group tactics come into play. But obviously that's national teams, and you can train that. With 100 versus 150, it's going to be interesting to see if people stick to their banners, or is it going to break down into smaller, their national teams, or is there going to be some kind of, as you said, communication amongst the overall captain for each side as to how, what the game plan would be. I mean, of course, don't tell me if you know, because I don't want to give anything away to anyone.
Don't want to give away our secrets.
Yeah, exactly, if whatever they are. But I can't wait to see that one personally. Another thing I wanted to ask you, as someone who's been fighting for as long as you have, is that I remember when I first saw you start to fight, you were wearing Eastern kit, and now obviously you're sat here wearing Western kit. So having fought in both, I was wondering what your thoughts were on the pros and cons of each style of armour.
So traditional European armour is good because it's very strong protection, good mobility, and it's kind of designed for the Bohurt style of fighting.
Yeah.
It's also easier to get through authenticity checks because it's much easier to prove, a lot of evidence, and really easy to achieve. My late period Russian armour, my Rus armour, really, really good and flexible. I can move very, very quickly, but a lot less protection, especially around the shoulders than that.
Yeah.
A really good protection on the body, but I had to incorporate some hidden elements to be safe during Bohurt. So both have good pros and cons, but I'm going to go back to my Eastern armour eventually. It just needs a bit of an overhaul. It's pretty badly beaten after about 4 years of fighting.
So even though you've had the Western armour and you would, as you just have said, it's got better protection values, what is it about the Eastern that's sort of like drawing you back to that?
Part of just the style itself. I love the fluting of my Zersalo and the scale and plate style of armour, just the look of it, and also very, very manoeuvrable. I can move my arms really, really fast with my striking. I just need to move quicker so I don't get hit as much. Yeah,
that doesn't matter what armour you're wearing, that's always the key. So I think with that we can say thanks a lot to Bryce for coming and sitting with us and being interviewed by us. And once again, if you catch back over to the live stream, you'll see the men's 5v5 and you'll hear me and Gavin as always. Until then.